Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's edition of Building from Ground Up. My name is Koromone. I am the moderator for today's session, and I am Tech Cabal's managing editor and acting editor-in-chief. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Today, we're going to be speaking to Ire Aderinokun, and we're really excited for today's conversation. Ire is the co-founder, COO and VP of engineering at Helicarrier, and we're really excited to have her here. I just want to quickly run through our agenda for the morning, and then I'm going to bring up some people to speak. Building from, just a brief intro about Building from Ground Up. Building from Ground Up, the series powered by the UK Nigeria Tech Hub, and Tech Cabal is just an implementing partner. So thank you to the UK Nigeria Tech Hub team for putting this together. And then we're going to first hear from Carolina Oakes. She is the Tech Hub networking manager in the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport. And then we're going to have Ire come up and to give a brief intro before we get into the conversation. Just a little before Carolina speaks, actually, just a bit more information about the Building from Ground Up series. The Building from Ground Up series seeks to bring together founders across the Nigeria and UK tech ecosystems. And we bring these founders together to share their stories of building and scaling, as well as useful, instructive insights for founders and aspiring founders. So if you're a founder on this call, or you're thinking about one day setting up your own business, startup, or whatever it is, then this series just really brings the brightest mind operating in our ecosystem, and they share tips, they share insights, they share the experiences, and it's a great way to basically learn from people who have been in the game for a bit longer. In our last episode, we spoke to Chichi, who is the founder of Ascenti. That video session will soon be available, but you can catch up on our other episodes. We've had Tito Ovia, who is co-founder at Helium Health, Femi Adeyomo, who is founder and CEO Energy. We've had Otochek CEO as well. We've had a couple of other great founders and operators on Building from Ground Up, and those episodes are available. You can go on our website to find them. Now, I'd like to invite the Tech Hub Network Manager at the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sports, Carolina Oakes, to tell us more about the hub. So, Carolina, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Carolina. I'm calling in from London, and I'm based at the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sports here in the UK. And I am a Tech Hub Network Manager, which means that I work very closely with the team out in Nigeria, working at the UK Nigeria Tech Hub. So I'll just tell you a little bit more about what the Tech Hub does and our work. Essentially, we are aimed at sort of addressing three different issues that all come together. First of those is making sure that we are fostering digital skills in the Nigerian economy, so working on projects that foster lots of different digital skills within the ecosystem. For example, we are just having a graduation ceremony right at this minute, I think, for our design, product and developer school. We also are really keen to be supporting tech entrepreneurship in Nigeria as well, and ensuring that we're building capacity within the ecosystem. And this series is part of that sort of pillar of our work. We work with angel investors to build their skills up, as well as we have another project that runs across our network of hubs called the Future Female Business School, which builds capacity for female entrepreneurs who are looking to do sort of mainly tech for good startups. We also work in influencing startup policy. For example, we've been working quite closely on the Startup Act in Nigeria as well. And also we are wanting to foster more connections with the UK and between the UK and Nigeria in the startup ecosystem in particular. I hope that gives a decent overview of what we do. We're really excited to be hosting this series of talks for the Building from Ground Up series. I think from personal experience, and I think a lot of people can relate to the fact that listening to an inspiring talk that is really helpful and where someone's really sharing their wisdom and their experience and their insights is a really great way to motivate yourself, but also to learn and get firsthand some proper advice. So really excited to be hearing this talk today. And be hearing a bit more about how we can be growing a business in this more virtual world that we're living in. So thank you so much for having me to introduce the talk, and thank you.
No problem. Thanks for speaking with us. Okay, so on to the main show. So Ire Aderinokun is a self-taught front-end developer and user interface designer from Lagos, Nigeria. She is also the co-founder, COO and VP of engineering at Helicarrier, which is a YC 2018 company, summer 2018. And Helicarrier is a company building cryptocurrency infrastructure for Africa. Helicarrier is behind products such as Bitcoins, which a lot of us are familiar with, Sendcash, Sendcash Pay, and more. In addition, Ire is a Google expert, specializing in the core front-end technologies such as HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, but is passionate about all aspects of technology. She has written over 100 articles on this topic. I haven't even written over 100 articles on this that I know, and I'm a writer. I'm very concerned. And she has a great blog. I'm actually going to pop that into the chat box. And she actually does share a lot of what she knows, and because she's self-taught and she started like really young, she knows a lot of information, and I'm hoping that we get to hear some of that as it pertains to building and managing distributed teams when a company is going through its growth stage. So Ire, thank you so much. You can unmute your mic and say hello.
Hi, thank you for the amazing introduction. I feel very accomplished. But yeah, thanks. I feel like I don't have anything to add to that. That was like a great introduction. But yeah, I'm excited to be here. And yeah, that's my blog in the chat. It's about front-end development. But yeah, I'm excited for us to get started. And sorry about the lighting. Okay. It's like slowly, the sun is slowly moving in this direction. So I'm trying to scoot here, but then it keeps catching up with me.
But we can see you clearly. We can see and hear you
okay,
clearly.
Good.
So we'll just, yeah, even me, my background, my shadows are shifting. Okay, so let's get right in. So I actually want to start off with you just sharing a little bit about your background, like when you started. What was your early interest in software engineering, in building, in coding, anything really related to what you do now? Can you just walk us through sort of how you came into this sector, and then we'll take it from there?
Okay, yeah. So like you mentioned, I started web development as a teenager. I was introduced to it through this online game I used to play that sort of taught you some very basic HTML and CSS, and you were actually there. So I don't know if I'm allowed to say that you were actually physically present
no,
when I was
no, you can actually say, sorry, they can't know about us like that.
Yeah. But yeah, it was just some random thing that I was doing, and it wasn't anything that I really thought was something that I could make a career out of. It was just, like I said, it was part of the game. So it was literally just playing to me. So it wasn't really until, even when I went to university, I ended up studying psychology for my undergraduate, and then I studied law for my master's. So I was still very it wasn't something in the realm of, oh, this is something I can do as a career. It was literally just a side hobby. But it was only after all of that I actually discovered that, oh, people actually can make a career out of this. And since it was something I was just interested in for such a long time, I felt like it really made sense for me to at least give it a try. So once I graduated from my master's, I really just gave myself about a year to see if I could at least do something. And I obviously had law to fall back on if it didn't work out, but luckily it did work out. So I didn't have to actually end up being a lawyer. But yeah, so early on I worked at Tech Cabal actually, which was my first real job. And then I worked like at a company based in Germany that builds like ad block software. So I was building websites with them. But then after that, like I started working on what back then, which was called Bitcoin Africa, but then became Bitcoins, just sort of like as a side project, another kind of fun thing to work on. And it just sort of grew as we started to understand like the real potential for it. And then we, applied and got into YC, and it became like a whole lot more real from there.
Really cool. And it's great to actually have a BCM alumna on the call because we're just celebrating, people who had helped the company get to where it is now. So that's always really exciting. So I want to talk about, so obviously you mentioned studying psychology and then you talk about studying law, right? And these are two, I would say, programs or degrees that require a lot of your time. How are you able to manage your actually working on what is now a professional interest, but started off as just a passionate interest? How are you able to manage school, both in your bachelor's and your master's, and also manage teaching yourself, and then eventually like becoming a professional at what you do? How are you able to balance both?
Yeah, so I mean, before I got into my master's, it was still just something I did, like I said, very much just as a hobby. I still hadn't decided to take it seriously yet. So it wasn't really an issue prior to my master's to try and juggle both. It was only like during my master's that I actually then, rediscovered it more seriously. And then I now decided that I actually wanted to take it seriously. So as soon as I graduate, I'm going to try and work on this full time. So that was obviously a lot more difficult, particularly because like a master's in law was obviously very time intensive. So I really had to manage my time very well. And what ended up happening was that most of the time I would only really work on this stuff during like when I had breaks, because otherwise I wouldn't really have the time to do it during the actual term. So it was really like, okay, when I'm on summer holiday or when I'm on like Christmas holiday is when I would then try and do like one short course here or there, or just like try and work on this or work on that. But yeah, it was definitely difficult to try and manage while I was like at school.
I just realized I was muted.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there was a lot of time management that went into balancing both school and then also learning everything that kind of helped you get to this point right now. So let's talk about Bitcoin Africa, right? And Bitcoin Africa was launched in 2017, correct? That's what we have in our information about you. Yeah, so 2017, right? That is, that's 5 years ago, and the ecosystem was in a completely different place at that time, right? I would even say that that's when a number of Nigerian-based tech companies were beginning to find their footing. At that time, I was at Flutterwave. That was like a year after I joined Flutterwave. So I know that ecosystem at that time was just charging up, right? So when you think back to building Bitcoin Africa, right, can you talk to us about like what led you to say, okay, you know what, I want to start a company like this, or I want to build a product like Bitcoin Africa? And then can you also talk to us about like the journey from Bitcoin Africa to Bitcoin before we even get to Helicarrier Studio?
Yeah, so like I said, initially it was very much like, this is something that we can work on and it's something that we can build, like Bitcoin Africa. So like myself and my co-founder built the first version, and it was it was something that we saw that was achievable, and because we had the capabilities to do it, it made sense for us to at least like give it a try, right? Because it wasn't going to cost us anything besides our time, really. So that's kind of what the approach that we took at that point. But then once we then got into YC, or when we were applying for YC, was when we actually had to like properly make the decision about how seriously we want to take this. So the first time that we applied, which was like the day that we launched, we didn't get into the program at that point, but we got some good feedback that, okay, this is, something that they're interested in, and, they kind of like us as well. But one of the things that they also flagged was like, okay, well, how seriously are you willing to take this? Like, are you actually ready to fully focus on this, because at the time I was working with the company in Germany, and I was even actually like thinking, oh, my next step would be to try to work at like a more global company like a Google or something like that. So I wasn't even, the first time we applied, I wasn't really in the mindset of, okay, I'm ready to drop everything to actually focus on being an entrepreneur. I felt like I even felt like I wasn't completely ready for it at the time. But then when we applied the second time, it was like a decision that, well, I actually needed to either fully commit to doing this or just not be a part of it. And I felt like it was sort of a once in a lifetime opportunity. So something that I felt like, okay, well, up until now, like I said, the only thing we had really spent was our time, right? So I felt like it was not necessarily low stakes, but I felt like I was in a time in my life where I could actually afford to make the mistake, right? It's probably better to do that kind of thing earlier in your life than to wait until you're like, I don't know, however old. And then at that point, say, okay, let's like try and be an entrepreneur and try doing something that's extremely like risky. So I just felt like, okay, this is the decision that I'm going to make. So when we went for our final like YC interview, I had to come in saying, okay, well, I had quit my other job. I was like, I'm fully focused. And so that was kind of like a turning point. And then for the transition into Bitcoins, that happened during YC. So one of the things they tell you is that, you know, what you come in with, the product that you come in with is not necessarily going to be the product that you leave with. And the whole point of the process is about, you know, finding product market fit, trying to determine what exactly your product should be. So one of the things that we realized through that process was that our whole model of the way Bitcoin Africa worked, which was a lot more like peer-to-peer and a lot more like, it actually like didn't fix the problem that we thought we were trying to fix. And that's something that we learned through going through YC. And then we realized, oh, we actually need to rebuild this product. And that's kind of where we transitioned into Bitcoins, which was a lot more of the type of product that we were trying to build with Bitcoin Africa, but not realizing that we didn't actually end up building.
It's really great response. To just briefly talk about what it felt like applying to YC at that time, because obviously that was your first time, right? And I know that when founders are getting ready to apply to YC, there's a lot of thinking that goes into it, a lot of careful thinking that goes into it, and ensuring that you're putting your best foot forward, right? Even though all you have is an MVP, right? So what was your experience like? And do you find that first-time founders or aspiring founders who want to get into YC reach out to you or Timmy or Tommy what to just ask for advice, or, you know, the best, like they ask for tips on, you know, how to put their application together and what they need to know before they even get through the front door?
Yeah, I mean, I think the application itself is a lot more like, I guess, almost personal. It's very like, you know, reflecting on why you're doing this, like what you think you want to be able to achieve. So I think where we see a lot more people reaching out for help is when you get to the interview, because that's a lot more like it can go almost any way. Like you have people that come out of the interview and, you know, they were asked like 10 billion like really intense technical questions, or you come out from, or like for our experience, right, our interview ended up actually being a lot less tell us about X, Y, and Z about the business and all of that. It actually ended up being a lot more about us. So it can really range a lot. And I think that's the because it's so, I don't know what the percentage is actually for like how many people do an interview versus how many people actually get it. But it's one of those things that's a lot more high stakes because it feels like, oh yeah, so close, and it's just this one very short thing that might determine everything. So that is something that we get a lot more people wanting advice around, and we, you know, try and do whatever we can when we have the time to like help people. But I think the advice that we usually give is obviously, you know your product, know what you're doing, but it's, I think it's a lot also about the impression that you leave and the confidence that you bring. So that's something that, you know, I always try and tell people.
Thank you. Okay, so back in 2017, I mean, it was just you, Timmy, and Tommy were trying to figure things out, trying to figure Bitcoin out, and then eventually buy coins, right? And then obviously have, you know, your early employees, as we like to call them. How much has the team grown since then, especially with Send Cash Pay being introduced? And I know that when Timmy hosted the event with technical founders or CTOs, you know, I know that he announced that there were some new things that were coming to Helicarrier Studio, right? So how much has the team grown since then? And can you tell us how distributed your employees are currently?
Yeah, so I mean, now we're a team of about 50. And I would say the way that we've grown is maybe for the first year or two, we like grew to maybe like 10 or something max. And it's more so 2020 and 2021 that we actually grew a whole lot more, which is kind of ironic because that was like the pandemic. So it feels like it should have been like the other way around, but actually that was the point at which we actually grew a whole lot more. Sorry, what was the second question?
The second question was, how distributed are your employees?
Oh, yes. So most people are in Nigeria. Most people are even in Lagos. Okay. I would say like maybe 80 to 90% of people are in Lagos. There's some other people like outside of Lagos still in Nigeria, and we'll say we have like a handful of people in other places, but most of it is still like, so Ghana, Kenya, like I'm in the UK. So it's mostly still in that same like area. And, you know, one of our co-founders goes back and forth between the US. So he's the one that probably has like more of a drastic change in time zone at times.
Okay. 50, I think that's a really nice number because you're not too small or you're not too big, right? So talk to me about how you and your co-founders sort of manage meetings, productivity, especially when you're in different locations, right? Are there specific days where you dedicate to connecting with your team members in Lagos versus your team members like again in Kenya or in Ghana, right? What does that look like? And what challenges have you experienced since your team started to grow?
Yeah, I think it's a problem that we haven't faced significantly yet because, like I said, we are all mostly in the same time zone. And the way we work is that, you know, the Lagos time zone is like the main time zone, right? So that's typically what we align like meetings and stuff around. So meetings will usually be within that working day. But I think another thing that helps us a lot is that we have always very much been like working in an asynchronous manner. So we don't have like a lot of meetings. We don't have a lot of like stand-ups. We don't have a lot of like, oh, you always need to be here at this time. Like we do have a working day in the sense that like our official working time is, you know, 10 to 6, but that doesn't necessarily mean that if somebody needed to do something in the afternoon, that's like, we're going to be like, no, you have to do it outside working hours, because that's not really how we work. We're very much about, if you're, you know, achieving your targets, we don't necessarily care how you split your time. Like there are people who might just want to work for like 4 hours in the middle of the night. And if that's, as long as you're like still having the output that we want, like we're completely fine with that. In terms of like how we actually like get things done, so I think we rely a lot on like the tools that we use. So, you know, Basecamp currently is our like main project management tool. So, you know, it allows us to keep track of like tasks, what everyone is doing at any point of time. And that also helps with I guess building that trust, because the way that we work, or having this very like asynchronous working manner, only really works when you are trusting that people aren't going to like take advantage of that. And that's why we like to, as much as possible, do things out in the open. So if you're doing something like it is on Basecamp, so if at any point I wanted to see, oh, what has this person been doing for the past week, I can see exactly what they've been doing. So there's that. And we do still use other tools. So I think another one that we like to use is called Tandem, which is something like if you're available, if you're like at your computer, you can like sign into Tandem and people can just kind of ping you if they need to like quickly ask a question or do something like that. It's like a virtual workspace basically. So it's kind of like we try to have that combination between like, you know, when you're available, be like on Tandem or be on something so that people can reach out to you if they need to. But generally speaking, unless something is actually like super urgent, which we try not to make things that way, people don't necessarily need to be at any given place at any given time.
Yes, I'm going to go ahead and share this Tandem link with Cabal Leadership because it sounds amazing.
Yeah.
But I love this, and I love what you said about the culture of transparency, because we have that at BCM as well, where we don't work in silos, and it's very important that we open up documents, you know, shared with multiple team members, so people know what you're working on and they're able to assist you. And I do think that a lot more startups and founders should kind of include that in their policies, like be transparent, be open. So let's talk about hiring, obviously. You know, but before we actually talk about hiring, I want you to clarify something about your role, right? Because you are both COO and VP of engineering, which are two separate things, right? Because COO is largely in charge of running operations in the company or in the business, but engineering is quite technical, right? So how are you able to, I guess, balance both, right? And switch between both hats, right? When you have to focus on the engineering side of the business and then also the operational side of the business as well.
Yeah, I think it's definitely very different, but I guess the way that I think about it is that I'm kind of just like managing these different teams, and there we have like, you know, other people that might be able to help be more involved in like the actual granular details of things. But at the end of the day, like I'm just kind of the one that's shaping the direction of how things are going. So it doesn't feel that overwhelming. I guess maybe there's a bit of a context switch sometimes in that, I'm doing this one day, but then somebody else needs me for something else. But I don't necessarily feel like they are actually, they are obviously different roles, but it just doesn't feel like, oh, I am like switching between different hats. It's just like maybe the actual details are different, but ultimately it's still just kind of managing different teams. And in terms of even like doing actual engineering, I obviously do a lot less actual engineering work, but because of the way that we actually assign tasks, so we work in sprints. So every like 4 to 6 weeks, we set out, okay, this is what we're working on for this sprint, and we define like, okay, what the tasks are going to be. And, you know, based on how much like operation stuff I have, I might say, okay, I'm going to do less of actual engineering work, or I might decide to do more because I have like less ops work. So it's just, I guess, about finding that balance. And yeah, I guess, like I said, it doesn't feel so separate to me.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's talk about hiring now. There's a lot of conversations around the fact that finding talent is so difficult now, especially finding talent within Nigeria, where a huge proportion of your team is based, and just generally in Africa, we're experiencing a brain drain and all of that, right? So can you talk to us about when it comes to hiring, how do you think about it? How do your co-founders think about it? And how involved are you in the process, especially now that your team is growing?
Yeah, so for us, the way we think about hiring is, we look at a person's skills, obviously, but it's kind of like two-pronged. So we looked at their skills, and then we also look at how they might fit into our culture, because we feel like our work culture is a big part of the reason that we are able to work the way we do. Like I said, even with working very asynchronously, that requires a lot of trust. So we need to only be able to hire people that we feel like we can have that trust in. So yeah, that's, I guess, like the culture aspect. But with the skills aspect, we actually like tend to focus a lot more on like, I'm using the word skills rather than, I guess, maybe like CV. And that's a little bit more intentional, because we will obviously look at your CV and it will inform things, but for me, particularly when I'm like starting to hire like new front-end engineers, like it always starts with, okay, I'm giving them a task to do to kind of see what their skills are. So we're a lot less concerned about, okay, what school did you go to? What other companies did you work at? Than like, what can you actually do? And that also feeds into the culture. We're looking for the type of person that you are, not necessarily what you've done. But yeah, it is definitely difficult. And like you said, I think when we first started, the main issue we were facing was, okay, well, this is such a new space, particularly like blockchain, like, okay, where are we going to find people who can actually even do this to begin with? So there was, and there still is a lot of like training. But like you also said, now we're actually almost facing the opposite in that like we're finding people who are skilled, but most or a lot of people want to then leave the country because of whatever reasons. So we are now looking at, okay, well, how can we still remain competitive even though we're like a country sort of based in Nigeria and people are trying to, leave the country? And that's why we, do whatever we can in terms of being as competitive as we can, especially with our move to paying staff using crypto and USDC instead of like Naira, because that is also like a big factor for people. But yeah, I think I've like lost my train of thoughts, but yeah.
No, we got the gist. And so essentially you guys apply sometimes traditional, but mostly unconventional processes when it comes to hiring, right? So the CV is fine, but then we also want to know that you can actually do the job and that you can fit into the culture as well. And so I want to say on this culture.
And just to even add to that, like we've even more recently started doing more like trials with people. So even though we will go through an interview process, we also want to like actually work with you for a certain amount of time before we actually fully commit to hiring. And that's like I said, that's why we focus a lot more on like, okay, well, show up and do the work rather than you telling us you can show up and do the work.
You can show up and do it. I really like that. It's like a vetting period for both the founders and the employees as well. So both parties get to like decide, oh yes, I like working for you. No, it's not working out, and there are no hard feelings or anything like that. So I wanted to stay on the culture of the conversation of culture, because as a startup grows, especially when it's moving from seed to scale up, right? Sometimes things get lost in translation, and obviously we know that there are a lot of tech startups that don't have great culture. So can you talk to us about how you and your founding team are able to sort of not just maintain, but even improve upon the culture as you add more people to the team? What are some things that you guys do to ensure that, okay, we're still communicating respectfully, we're still being mindful of the people that we're working with? And do you have any tips to share with any aspiring founders on the call?
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is a issue that we are almost like on the edge of facing a lot more gravely than we are now. Like, I think at our current team size, the approach that we currently have is working, but I imagine that when we like double and we're like 100 people, it might not necessarily work as well. We need to also like rethink how things will work as we grow even more. But I would say that a huge part of why we've been able to maintain this culture is by making sure that each member of the team actually has a direct relationship with at least like 2 of the 3 of us. So one of the 3 of us will probably be like one of your managers, for example. So like if you're a front-end engineer, I'll be like one of your managers. But we also have a like sort of mentorship type of thing as well, where each member of the team does like one-on-one calls and just like meetings with one of the founders that they don't actually directly work with. And that's a lot more about, it's not really about, what you're working on. It's more about like, okay, how are you feeling? Like, how are things going in the company? Like, do you have any concerns about anything? Like, what goals do you want to achieve? Like, what can we do to like improve like how you're doing? But also about making sure that the person is understanding like what our vision is and understanding what our culture is. So I think having that relationship with the three of us really helps. And like I said, everyone will have some like very meaningful interaction with at least two of the three of us. And because of that, it allows us to really still like directly show or like, you know, actually transfer that like culture. And like I said, I think that works for now, definitely. And I think it can still work for us growing for a while. But I think at a certain point in time, we'll have to think about how we can still have that, even though it's not that direct relationship anymore. Because I imagine if we're like 1,000 people, we can't necessarily keep up doing like one-on-ones, or at least not doing it the frequency that we currently do it. It's like I speak with most people at least like once a month or once every like 1 or 2 months. So that kind of like deeper relationship might not be as easy to maintain. But I think because we have that relationship with these relatively like early employees or early staff, they can now be the ones to then also transfer that to the other people. So I think just making sure that people are finding a way to like build those relationships is what's really important in transferring the culture, because it's very possible to work at a company and never speak one-on-one with anybody. And if you never do that, then there's no way to actually like understand how things, like what the culture is. So having that sort of like one-on-one relationship is really important.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned, I mean, as the team grows bigger, it will become difficult. And this is something that I've heard a lot of C-suite executives say, that they don't, sometimes people join the team and they don't know who it is. They just see an email pop up and they're like, oh, okay, so, so I have a new team member, right? You know, so how do you, I mean, in those moments, do you feel sort of nostalgic for when the team was smaller and you knew every single person, like, and you knew their names, right? Or do you just feel like, okay, you know what? Yes, I might miss a smaller team, but this is actually a sign of growth, right? Or is it somewhere in the middle?
It's definitely somewhere in the middle. And I think I feel this a lot more than my other co-founders, because I haven't been back to Nigeria in such a long time. So the last time I was in Nigeria, we were a team of like 10 or something. And now we're a team of 50. So that means like 40 people work in this company and I don't know what their face really looks like. And I even say that specifically because we don't do a lot of video calls. We actually just, like, there are people I generally don't know what their face looks like. And they don't, I mean, I guess they would know what my face looks like because like they would know me, but it's just funny. And even we also have like an end of year party each year. And, you know, we had one last year. And so all the people who are in Lagos were able to attend that. And one of the things that so many people said when I was asking them about it was that like, it was funny because there were so many people that like, they were like, oh, are you this person? Oh, are you that person? You have to like ask, like, wait, who are you exactly? But then you realize that this is somebody that you've been talking to almost every day for like months, but like you don't have that like physical. So it's definitely funny. And I think for us, we sort of even lean into that because we know we're like crypto or blockchain. I feel like we could even get to a point where we might have an employee that we actually don't know their real identity. I think that's even completely possible. And we've seen this at other companies. Like I think maybe, I don't know whether it's A16Z, but I've seen this in another company where they hire somebody who's an actual anonymous person. And I feel like that's actually possible because like I said, at the end of the day, are you producing the work? Are you like doing the thing that we want? Like you're also getting something from us in being a part of our team, but we don't have to physically see each other. So it's kind of interesting, but it is kind of like, I do sometimes get nostalgic for when we were such a small team and all our, like every Friday it was like every Friday, we would just like, you know, at the office, you know, play a few games. And like, because we were like 9, we could all just play the game together. But like now you're going to be playing with one person, another person will be doing that. It's not really the same. So it's definitely like a challenge, but I think in the future, another thing we would really like to do more is, you know, proper offsites where we actually have
Yeah.
really proper team bonding where for a few days or even up to a week, we're actually like fully trying to get to know each other. And I think as we grow and we're no longer really able to all have that like one-on-one relationship with everyone, that kind of stuff will become really important, where we actually take time out. And the point of taking that time out is to just focus on those relationships.
Yeah, exactly. Because sometimes offsite meetings happen to sort of plan a strategy for the next year or the next quarter, but you're actually not bonding because you're still working, right? So so it's easy to just go back to your respective homes or countries and not have actually formed a proper like rapport with your team member or your coworker, right? Or even your manager, So that's a really good response. Okay, so we're going to move into the Q&A portion. So there's some questions in the Q&A box that I want to ask you. So I'm going to start with this one because I was going to ask the same. This is from Kitaka, and they're asking, what could be your take during decision making in the company's growth stage? I actually want to ask this in a different way because I wanted to ask you about how you guys make decisions, right? Especially as COO and VP of engineering, right? So are you guys more of a let's huddle together as founders and let's make this decision quickly, or this is something that we want to throw open to some key members in our team, and then we're going to move quickly? How do you guys approach decision making, especially in the growth phase of a company?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it really depends on what it is. There are obviously some decisions that it makes sense for only us as co-founders to decide on. But I would say in terms of like product decisions, we generally it's a lot more open. So for example, I mentioned the way we do our sprints, but at the beginning of each sprint, before we decide what we're going to do, basically everybody in the team is allowed to like pitch what they think we should work on. And it's from that pool of pitches that we then decide, okay, this makes sense to work on now. This doesn't make sense to work on now. So everybody, no matter what team you're in, like whether it's like a product engineering, your customer support, your finance, anything, you're allowed to pitch what you think should be like to like determine, our product direction. But obviously when the decision is about like when it comes to the decision of actually deciding, okay, like what are we going to work on, then that's like a smaller group of people. So it's like, our product managers or people like leading certain teams. So it's like a combination. And that has, I would say, like obviously at the very beginning, it was mostly us co-founders making those decisions. But as we've grown, we have, incorporated this so that, everyone has the opportunity to actually like have an impact on what they're even working on.
Yeah, I like that. A hybrid approach, I think, is the best approach to take. There's another question about execution here that I really like as well. So Modupa is asking, what challenges you face in organizing an operating system for the team that powered execution? So I want to ask this in a different way. So I believe that the question is really asking about processes and frameworks, especially tied to execution, right? Because at the end of the day, execution is the game, right? And like you said, you don't just want someone to say they're going to show up, you just want to see them show up, right? So what challenges did you face in actually putting together a framework or a set of processes that drive execution at Helicarrier?
I think this is a good question because it's like a challenge that we faced, because initially when you have early employees, they're the ones that are like the most like passionate about things, right? So you don't actually need to be on them to like do anything, right? They're just always going to, like, they're almost like us as being founders, in the sense that they're very driven to just get things done. You don't need to remind them to do anything. But obviously, as the company grows, there develops a bit more of a distance between like an employee working at the company and how they feel about how tied, I guess, they are to the organization itself. So I think the way we do our sprints has changed a lot. Like we've had to incorporate more like check-ins and people being like, okay, this is what I've worked on today, like this is what I'm going to work on tomorrow, that kind of thing. So kind of like keep people a bit more accountable. But I think it also comes down to the culture. And for us, like if we see somebody who doesn't get anything done unless we like are constantly like on them for doing it, then that's just not a good culture fit for us.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. There is okay. So someone's asking a question about knowing the right time to pivot a company from an original idea. So let's say the MVP, your MVP, a new idea that has a broader view or a new market, right? So is there anything as the perfect time, or do you just say, okay, we've tested for about a year, let's get this product to the next level, or let's completely change direction and move in a different way and change this product completely?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things, or the biggest things that we learned from YC is that, like, if you feel like something isn't working, like, you should never be afraid to just kind of cut it off and change what you need to do. And the example they always gave us was the Airbnb founders. Like, they came into YC making like cereal or something, and they came out with like Airbnb. So it's like literally just, if you see something is not working, like every second you spend like still trying to make it work is not benefiting anybody. Like, you're not benefiting yourself by doing that. So do not like ever be afraid to pivot. And that's also why we also really love to do MVP. So we like to, if we know there's something that we need to get out, we're always thinking, okay, what is like the most minimum thing we can get out there, so that we can start getting feedback about whether it's actually worth spending any time on this. And we've seen this so much, like even with Bitcoin Africa, we probably could have gotten that out earlier. Or with, there's so many features that we've had that there was a way to do this, like the perfect way that would have taken 6 months, or there was a way to do it more quickly and just to kind of get it out there that would take a month, and we would opt for the one that would take a month, and then we'll realize that the thing we were thinking that was the best way to do it that would have taken 6 months is actually like nobody even wants that. So you learn so much more by just getting something out there and getting that feedback and knowing whether it is a good idea or not. Like, there's no value in an idea that just because you had it like first, that doesn't make it better than something that you had later from basically learning from feedback.
Yeah, nice. So I would say that maybe there's no such thing as a perfect time, but you just kind of have to understand what's happening in the market and how you can essentially amend your product to fit what's happening in the market. Like, and which I'm sure a lot of people have to do in 2020 after the lockdown, right? So people realize that, okay, maybe my product is not useful here, but might be useful in this way. So that's a really good response. Okay, so someone here has a question about, okay, this is an interesting one. And I don't know how involved you are in, PR around Helicarrier, but this is a question on how do you notify your team after you do a press release, or a PR agency does several articles on behalf of the company. So I guess, is this, whenever you guys are about to do, I guess, big press announcement, do you tell the entire team before, or do you just wait until after it goes out and then you say, okay, this is what's going on and this is what this announcement means?
Okay. I don't think there's ever, at least from my memory anyway, there's ever been something that we have announced that like the team didn't know about before. So I think maybe it's because of the way we work in terms of like, when we start the new sprint, everybody knows what is being worked on, right? So everybody knows like what something will eventually happen, right? So it shouldn't ever be a surprise that, oh, we've launched like our desk, for example. Like, everybody knew we were working on it and we were going to launch it. So it was not going to be a surprise to anybody on the team. So yeah, I don't think there's anything that has been like an important announcement that we've made that the team wasn't notified about internally beforehand.
Okay, thank you. Joshua has a question about how it seems as though new roles are being published, senior roles or managerial roles, which makes it harder for first timers, especially people who are trying to transition into tech, makes it harder for them to get into the ecosystem. Do you think that this is a prevalent issue that needs to be addressed? And do more startups, especially as they're transitioning out of seed to scale up, do they need to, I guess, create more roles for interns, associates, just people who are just trying to get their leg in, but may not have like 3, 4, 5 years of experience,
Yeah, this is definitely an issue that like I see. And I do agree that like companies should actually hire more for those types of roles. And that's why we even have like an internship program where focused around women who want to get into this space. So we kind of like, take on certain women and, they go through like either front end or back end or a combination of both. And they kind of move up through there. And we have people working in the company who have come in through this internship program and are now progressing to senior levels. I think there is a bit of a balance to be struck in that, at the end of the day, you're still a company. So you need to be able to make sure that even if you are taking on interns or people who are at a lower level, that you're still able to meet whatever targets that you have. So I understand the difficulty that companies might face around doing that, but there is a way to do it. And I think that particularly like in the space that we're in the sense that like, it is even difficult to find a lot of people at those senior or managerial roles. So the only way to get somebody at that role is to actually like, train them to get to that role. So it is definitely difficult. And I agree that more companies could be more intentional about trying to hire at those lower levels.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you really have a lot of control over that, especially when your company is going into the growth stage, right? Because one thing I've noticed, and I've seen this across the board, even with companies that have gone on to raise Series C, Series D, is that as they grow larger, they want to hire highly skilled people because your early employees are usually generalists, right? Eventually, some of them become skilled at a specific thing, but you don't want to risk bringing in more generalists when you are in your scale-up stage because you can afford to, like, you need people who know what they're doing well to help take the company to the next level. And then maybe after that, you can then set up a program for newer entrants to sort of support their growth. But yeah, I think it's a bit tricky there. Okay, so somebody has a question about hiring, and they're asking, like, do you guys use headhunters? Do you use recruiters, or I guess referrals, or do you actually just put out the position and sort of have to go through the process of going through CVs and reading responses and things like that?
Yeah, so I would say it's a combination, but I would say it's actually mostly just putting things out there and seeing whatever we receive, whatever application we receive, and going through that. I would say that's how most of the people that we've hired have come from. But we do take, referrals. I think that's also a really valuable way of getting people, especially if somebody within the company refers somebody else. I think that's helps a lot because that at least shows that the person being referred will at least align on certain culture things. But yeah, I think just definitely a combination.
Okay, combination, I think that works as well for most companies. And then the final question in our Q&A before I move to audience questions is someone asking your strategy in approaching the market. What is your strategy? I'm not sure. This is an anonymous question, so I don't know what you mean by approaching the market. But the second part of their question is, where at the time you were building Bitcoin Africa, and I would even say up until Bitcoin, were you talking to investors while you were building the product, or were you approached after, especially after YC, were you approached by investors?
Yeah, I'll answer the second question first. So when we were building the very first version, we weren't really actively speaking to investors. Like I said, we kind of wanted to get something out there before we started fundraising so fully. But obviously, once you get into YC, then fundraising becomes a lot more active. But at that point, we also had a product. So we weren't fundraising off the back of an idea. We're fundraising with a working product that was out there. And for the first question, which was about strategy in approaching the market, I think I would kind of go back to what I said about if we think that there's something that we need to get out there, just getting feedback from users as early as possible. And that's kind of how we know whether something is going to actually be product market fits, because we have to actually get the market to tell us whether what we built works or not. So
Yeah.
I would say like a big thing for us is getting feedback from the markets, and that really informs our product decisions.
Okay, thank you. I hope that I hope people's questions were answered. A few more are coming in, but I want to ask one of the questions that we got in from our audience members who registered for the event. So first, we've got two very interesting personal questions. The first one is, what was your dream job growing up? Do you remember?
I feel like I don't at all, because I think that's also why I struggled a lot, like picking what I was going to study at university, because I don't think I ever had like, oh, when I grow up, I want to be this or that. So when I was about to go to university, I picked psychology because that was just my favorite subject at the time. And I didn't want to be a psychologist. I didn't want to like, so there was literally no, I think the only phase I had where I was like, oh, I want to be this was when I thought I was going to be a surgeon. But that was basically like from Grey's Anatomy. So I don't think it was like really well thought out. I just saw their life and I was like, I think I could do this. So yeah, I don't think I ever really had that whole dream job or anything.
Like, I can imagine you in uni for like 8 years trying to be a surgeon. Like, that's
and that really quickly, like I thought about it, and then I really was like, am I going to be at university for like, and 8 years is just like almost the minimum, right? So I was just like, no, I can't.
So we're going to say surgeon inspired by Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The second one is about managing your day, which I'm actually interested in, right? And so, for example, when Jack Dorsey was still CEO at Twitter and also Square, he talked about breaking down his day. So Monday was management, Tuesday was this, Wednesday was that, right? So obviously you sort of wear two hats, right? So what does your work day look like? How do you sort of plan? And you know, what matters to you, for example, like break times, right? Is there a time where you just say, I've stopped working and I'm gonna just focus on personal things, you know, so things like that.
Yeah, I definitely face this a lot, because even outside Helicarrier, I have a lot of other like work that I still need to make time for. So for example, right now I'm working on a tech talk and I have to like then change that balance. Like for this week, I'm more focused on this talk and I just kind of do a lot of the, you know, more urgent or things that need to be done. But outside of that, I'm like, okay, I need to focus on this. But I would say like, I don't really have a day-to-day schedule, but what I do is that I make sure there are certain days. So like the way I do it is Wednesdays and generally Fridays, where I block that off as no like Helicarrier meetings, and if possible, no meetings at all. So I can actually just focus on getting things done. And then when I'm, you know, at the start of the week trying to think about, okay, what am I going to work on this week? Then I can now say, okay, during that like Wednesday and Friday, where am I going to slot in all the other things that I need to do? And then obviously also like on Mondays or something, I will also look at like, okay, what Helicarrier stuff do I need to get done this week? But I think the way I kind of just approach my actual day is I like some flexibility to it. So I don't do calendar blocking or anything like that, where I'm saying from this time to this time, I must work on this. I just have more of a goal for that day. And then, you know, I think I'm most productive in the morning. So I try also not to have too many meetings in actual mornings. I try to just, if I have to have a meeting, I'll do it like in the afternoon so that I can actually spend the mornings actually like getting work accomplished.
Yeah, I think that's important, knowing when you work best and try not to schedule meetings around those hours. And we also implemented a no meeting day once a week at BCM, and it is amazing because we all look forward to that day, knowing that you're not going to be in a meeting, even if it's just one, you know, I would try.
Exactly. It's funny that like everybody, I don't think anybody likes meetings, but everybody has so many meetings. And I don't understand how this happens, because everybody realizes like, even if I have one 15-minute meeting on a Wednesday, like I feel like it just derails my whole day, because I'm just like, I have to plan around it. So it's just like,
I don't know, we've gotten sucked into it, even though we don't like it, right? So I would say that to founders on the call, I'm telling you, your team members will love you if you just implement one day where you don't have any meetings, because that gives your team members just one day. It gives them, trust me, gives them time to actually plan, and it's better if it's at the start of the week. So they know that, okay, like, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I can plan and all of that, So that's a really, really good response. Okay, so there's a section, we have some questions on that building a startup, right? And one question is around securing funding for an early stage startup that's still working on an MVP. And I kind of want you to answer this from your perspective as an angel investor, because we know you've invested in a couple of really early stage startups, right? So what is your own approach in funding these companies, right? What is it that you look out for? And perhaps founders who are running early stage startups can know also how to put their best foot forward when they're looking for investment.
So did you specifically say prior to having an MVP?
No, the question, I think it's, so they said, no, they are working on the MVP, not actually ready yet. It's just still in process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's difficult because for me personally, I like to see that there's something created, right? Rather, like, I don't know, I think it's a bit difficult because, like, it's definitely difficult based on what you're working on to have that MVP. But I think being able to get to MVP tells me a lot about the person actually, right? So I think it shows that, you're going to be able to, I think it shows drive. It shows that you're able to actually like problem solve to the point where before being able to have much funding, you're able to actually get something out there. So for me, I think it is a huge factor to have something before you start fundraising, or at least from me. I feel like I don't think I would invest in something that is pre-MVP. So it is definitely like a balance to be struck. And I think even one of the reasons that we probably didn't get into YC the first time was that we launched the day that we applied, right? So we showed that there was something to be built, but we hadn't necessarily shown that, we're going to kind of keep up with it. We haven't necessarily shown that like it is something that anybody really wants. So I think it is really important to get to that point. But I think it also really depends on the situation you're in, because I think for some products, you just ultimately need some money, and not everybody has the privilege of being able to do like a quote unquote friends and family round. And if you're not really able to do that, then there's almost like nothing else you can do besides like just try to raise. But I would just say that like those are maybe a bit rarer circumstances where your company that you're trying to build absolutely needs something, and there's no way that you can actually build any form of MVP without some sort of capital. And that's kind of what I would say.
Oh, I'm whoever asked that question was on the call and they heard that response. It's pretty great. So the next section, before I actually ask this question, we're gonna put out a poll. Bolu, sorry, I just realized I'd asked one question before that. So a poll is gonna pop up on your screen shortly. Everyone who's listening in, please fill it out. It just helps us with making event better. So these questions are actually based on the conversation. So we're testing if you're actually listening to us or if we're just looking at our faces. So please
I was wondering why I
can't
fill out this form. Why can't I fill out the
Sorry,
form?
no, you can't fill it. That's cheating because you already know the answers. But please DM Ire for Expo because she might help you out. But please,
I won't help anybody.
And there are only 4 questions, but we can I can ask you the next question while people are figuring that out. So there's a question about knowing when you need to more developers on your team, right, or more engineers on your team. At what point do you realize that Timmy said, Ire, what's the answer? Please tell me.
On your own.
So yeah. So at what point do you know that, okay, our engineering team needs more support, or we need to bring in extra hands, right? Do you wait until like the team is like, oh, we need help, or is it something that you get assessed at a leadership level?
Yeah, so I would say earlier on, it was more about, okay, well, getting to the point where like or I guess almost the breaking points when we're extremely early on, right? We're like, okay, we need somebody to do this, we need somebody to do that. But I think for us, the switch really needed to happen to be like, okay, we don't need to operate in like, almost danger mode or survival mode, in the sense that, only when we're almost dying are we going to like add somebody else. We had to then switch to the, okay, well, actually this is a relatively established company. And even though we are still like a startup, we're still, wanting people to be very resourceful. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't like be a bit more like, have a bit more like forethought or foresight in what we're doing. So now we're a lot more like every, I don't know, a couple of months or something, we're like assessing to know, okay, what are we actually going to be building for the next couple of months? And are we able to achieve this with who we currently have? Or is it going to get to the point where it's going to start to feel like we're reaching that breaking point? So let's actually preemptively start hiring. And another reason we even had to switch to this way of doing things was because the process of hiring just takes so long. So if we were going to wait up until the point where we're like breaking and we need somebody, we have to recognize that it's going to take at least like 1 or 2 months to actually get a person. So that's why we had to like revisit and be like, okay, no, actually, let's start the process before we actually need the person.
Very true, very true. So there's a question about how you maintain the quality of work and consistency, especially when you're running operations, right? So what are some things that you just like, there are no-nos, once you see them, you flag it and you're like, okay, if we don't address this issue, then we could see the quality of work dropping, right? And I guess you guys have any safeguards against low quality work, right? And what does that look like for your team?
Well, I would say 2 things come to mind. So the first thing is obviously like everything is reviewed. So particularly like on the engineering or product side, like nothing goes out to users that hasn't been reviewed by like, a few different people. So nothing really makes it out that's like we are unhappy with. And I think it's also that review process that lets us catch whether we feel like somebody isn't doing something up to scratch. And that's something that we're always like on the lookout for. So if it feels like, okay, this person is consistently not really doing what we think that they should be doing, then that's kind of like a red flag for us. The other thing that comes to mind is just like communication. So going back again to the whole thing about like, having trust in our like employees to actually do the work instead of us having to like chase them up to do it. We are very like, we put a very big emphasis and importance on proactive communication. So what we really don't like is if somebody just kind of like doesn't really do a task and then they kind of wait for somebody else to ask them about it before they say, oh, the reason they didn't do this was because of X, Y, and Z. Like for us, that's like not acceptable at all. So what's acceptable is to say that, oh, today I am realizing that I'm not going to be able to achieve these tasks that have been set out to me for X, Y, and Z reasons. So I'm going to have to change the deadlines in this way. But what's not acceptable is the other way around. So that's something that we really like drilled into people. And that's like something we don't really have any tolerance for, because with all the, trust and all the communication that we do, we expect to definitely get that back.
Yeah, absolutely. So something. Oh, okay. So there's a question here which I'm, really interested in learning, and this is about motivating your employees, right? I'm interested in this because, anyone who lives in Nigeria kind of knows that we're dealing with a lot of issues, power, fuel scarcity, all of these things, right? And we're speaking internally as a team, like how do we motivate our employees despite the challenges they're facing, right? So talk to us about like 2020, right? Because a lot of companies experience challenges with motivating their team members when everyone had to go remote, right? This was when the world was shut down, right? So can you talk to us about like how you guys were able to overcome these challenges in 2020, and if you're still seeing those challenges now, or if you guys are motivating your team members in a different way?
Yeah, I think ultimately for us, what really helped was having people be aligned in the vision. So in that sense, COVID was actually like one of the things that might have helped or showed people the vision, because a lot of people faced a lot of like financial issues, and a lot of people began to see the value and importance in cryptocurrency. So I think people working on something that they really believed was making a difference definitely helped a lot with that motivation. But we're also very like, sensitive to people needing, like mental health support, or somebody is just not having a great period for their mental health. That's something that like, we're very understanding of. And if people need to, take breaks because of that, that's something that, we are completely fine with. Like I said, it's very much about communication. And if someone is feeling that lack of motivation due to just the circumstances around them, that's something that we try to be very understanding of, and not like, that doesn't mean that the person is just being like lazy or something. Like there's a reason for it, and it's something that, can be addressed. And we also try to do whatever we can to take out or like shields, I guess is maybe the best way to put it. Shields are like staff from the Nigerianness. So like I said, by paying them in a dollar pegged stable coin helps a lot, but we also have stipends for people's like internet and even for like their food. So we are trying to like remove the hassle of, I guess, day-to-day life in Nigeria by giving them the extra funds so that they can actually just, have a subscription on Eden, for example, and not have to like worry about food every day, and, just buy whatever internet package that they need to do, particularly like with working from home. So those are some of the things that we try to do, but it is like very difficult. And I think that as a company, we also need to be, or as companies in general, we need to be aware that, we're working with actual people, and nobody is like a robot that's just going to be consistently the same all the time. People are going to have like ups and downs, and we need to like understand that.
Yeah, very good point. So we're coming towards the end of the conversation. There are just a few more questions in the chat box that we're going to ask. So there's a question here about how you expand your team, but I have a feeling you kind of already covered that when you were speaking about recruiting. So I don't know if there's any more you want to add to that question about expanding your team. Is there any extra thoughts you want to add there?
Yeah, not really. I think I've kind of covered like, the process that we go through in actually getting people, and then like the interviewing process and, culture and things like that.
Yeah, okay, so I've already answered this. Okay, so there's a question here about the adoption of blockchain technology on financial sectors. Is this something that you can speak into? How, I guess, non-fintech or non-financial services operators can also adopt blockchain technology? Do you know about any opportunities that exist in that space? Yeah.
So I guess the way I understand this is about like, I guess, using the blockchain for other things besides just
other
like
things apart from finance. Yeah.
To be honest, it's still such like a brand new space. Like I don't think anybody really has come up with what other like actual practical applications of blockchain that are going to be besides like cryptocurrencies. There is definitely the potential for other things. Like I've seen people think about, okay, maybe we can use it for like, government registries. So stuff like, the land registry could be on the blockchain instead of being in like a box of papers in some like filing cabinet or something.
Yeah.
But there's definitely like applications for it. It's just that we haven't really seen those yet. So it's really up for anybody to be the one to, try out different things and maybe come up with what that like killer blockchain application is going to be.
Okay, thank you. And then the final question is, Clement is asking if Helicarrier has a human resources team that manages, or is it just something that the founding team does together?
I mean, HR is sort of part of like operations, so that's something that I'm also like very involved in. But we do have like, you know, an HR manager that deals with a lot of the logistics around the managing people. But like I said, I think the managing of the culture is more what comes from us as founders.
Okay, great. So that is the end. Thank you so much, Ire. Do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience before we close out?
I don't know, use Bitcoins, use Cash, use everything. Go and buy Bitcoin and buy coins.
go buy some cryptocurrency and buy coins, please, and support the industry. Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining us. Thank you, Ire, Carolina. Well, we have a survey we've just shared. That out. It just helps us make this event better. Our next and final episode of Building from Ground Up will take place on Friday, March 25th. That's next week Friday, and it's with Kay Akinwumi, co-founder and CEO of Zazu, a cross-border fintech. Thank you to UK Nigeria Tech Hub for powering the Building from Ground Up series. Thank you to TC Insights for organizing this event, putting it together and implementing it as well. TC Insights, or Tech Cabal Insights, is Tech Cabal's data research and intelligence unit, which provides actionable data of startups and the tech ecosystem across Africa to investors, entrepreneurs, big tech companies, pretty much anyone who is interested in understanding the data behind a lot of what's going on in the industry, funding, valuations, all of these things. TC Insights plays a huge role in putting that information together and publishing it on our website. We also have a couple of newsletters. We have TC Daily, which goes out every weekday morning at 7 a.m. And we have a newsletter called The Next Wave, which is more of a futuristic take on what's happening in the ecosystem and where the ecosystem stands to be in 5 years and 10 years. And that goes out every Sunday afternoon at 3 p.m. Everyone who is on this call, host, Tech Cabal, everyone, moderator, is on LinkedIn, UK Nigeria Tech Hub. So if you'd like to keep up to date with what's happening with Tech Cabal, with Helicarrier, with Ire, with UK Nigeria Tech Hub, please follow us on LinkedIn, and we'll pull all of that information there. There were some links that were shared in the chat. Ire's blog, a couple of other articles as well that we might find interesting, that you might find interesting. Please check the chat box and enjoy yourself. Thank you again, everyone. And in case you missed it, Tech Cabal Media, which is our parent company, raised some seed funding. We announced that yesterday. So Damlari, please share the article to our fundraise in the chat box. And so you guys can sort of catch up with Tech Cabal Media. Tech Cabal is a publication under Tech Cabal Media, and so is the COO as well. So if you'd like to learn more about what we're building as a Pan-African media company, please read that article. And that's it from me. Have a wonderful day, everyone.